Good evening, everyone. My name is Jannine Harris from ADHD Wires UK. I am I'm a teacher. I'm now a specialist teacher. I do sort of consultancy and help with all sorts of things with children in school. But actually, most of my work has evolved to be with adults and young people and providing coaching support, which I have absolutely fallen in love with, even though it wasn't the reason I left teaching. It's what I've fallen into, and serendipity steps in and makes life really interesting. Joining me this evening is Dr. Tony Lloyd from ADHD Foundation. We've done a fair few things together, so we know each other quite well, which was lovely when we were planning this, because we didn't have to plan too much, because we know we're just going to be able to sort of just let it flow, and we're going to be able to, take questions and things. Tony is the CEO of ADHD Foundation and has been a fantastic mentor for me. Some of my coaches are here, so you have a lot to thank Tony for. If I'm doing anything right by you, you've got a lot to thank Tony for. And I'm going to hand you over to Celia, who is one of my associate coaches, and Celia has an organisation called Acorn to Oak Education, but she does a lot of work for me as well, and she'll be fielding your questions and basically helping us to make sure things keep flowing, because, well, the three of us have ADHD, therefore many hands make light work. We hope everything with this evening will be quite informal as well as being informative. So yeah, we're just going to go with it and hopefully enjoy ourselves and make a little bit of a difference to you and the way you're managing at this peculiar time. Tony, do you want to say hello?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. We are in a very new space, aren't we, in terms of this this world that we're in at the moment, and the impact on our careers and our daily kind of structure and routine. For me, I think there's been many positives mentioned, isn't it? But I think what it's also really brought home to me is that I think under a microscope, and sometimes some of the more difficult aspects of managing ADHD seem to be managed. But equally, I'm aware of many people saying to me that they're actually thriving in this environment. It's really lockdown. They're enjoying working from home. They're enjoying having quality time with children. More and more, it's really made us focus on the fact that, within a small space, there are choices open to us in terms of what we want to do, how we make ourselves better, because we all have our own little things to see that we know can really lift our mood. And I think, in a time like this, we want everything to think, do you know what, actually, how well am I really managing my ADHD? I thought I'd always been managing it quite well. And that's putting some things to the test. And I think it's got to be an opportunity where we can learn something new and how we take care of ourselves, really, and how we maintain a positive attitude. And I think particularly understand the people around us, whether that's our children or our partner. And I think being really honest with ourselves, sometimes, what bit of this is ADHD and what bit of this is me perhaps not being considerate enough, what bit of this is seeing too much through the lens of ADHD rather than seeing it for what it really is, human beings together. Sometimes it raises a lot of questions for all of us about how we take care of ourselves, how we understand the impact that our behaviour and choices have on the people around us.
And I think also about how other people's actions and ways of being, whether they're neurotypical or whether they're neurodiverse, whether they've got autism and ADHD and dyslexia, how their behaviour impacts on us. There is a sort of like a protective bubble around us right now. I know I've got people here who have had really rough times of it when they are in the workplace, and actually they've really enjoyed this time when they've got sort of more freedom, and it's been beneficial to their mental health. And actually, if something is beneficial to your mental health, it's going to be beneficial to your ADHD. It's really, really helpful to have those sort of like the fact that not everybody is struggling. Some people are absolutely thriving during this time and are thinking, oh my goodness, how do I step back into the world of work? Because I like this. And I'm aware of some people who are teachers, for example, who have said to me, when this is all over, I will be handing in my notice and moving to a school local to me, because actually the commute is too much and I've realised the impact that it's had. So it is definitely a time for reflection, etc. So yeah. Celia, would you mind flipping to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay. So we have relationships with all sorts of people in our homes, and they are actually the most important people. Even if we have careers, even if we have bosses to answer to, the most important people are the people who are in our homes or in our hearts. So they may not be in your home, they may be down the road or somewhere else in the world, but they are still the people that are important to you. So these are the people that you have relationships with, relationships from the heart. So your partners, your children, your families, your friends, and yourself. So when Tony and I were talking about this, I was saying that I had even though I've got 3 rather grown-up children in my house, I still do date night with my husband, because actually, you know what, in all of this, I don't want to lose the magic of us. So we have date nights. And Tony, you were saying about having virtual dinner parties with friends?
Yeah. Well, we've missed friends, and we've kind of made a point now of actually setting the table, and the laptop computer is the unseen guest. Each week we're inviting different friends to join us for the evening, and we are literally having dinner. They're having dinner in wine, and the conversation is over dinner, which takes a few hours, and it's very, very relaxed. And of I think helping to manage loneliness, really, and I, you know, it's not just about being on your partner or your family, but we miss people we love and spend time with, and a lot of us don't have a lot to talk about because we're not going anywhere or doing anything. So I think sometimes perhaps, you know, whether we're doing keep fit classes together, aren't they, and speed cycling classes together, but actually you can have dinner together a little bit more intimate.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of doing things. I've had coffee and cake with people, because actually that's one of the things I really miss, because that's one of the things I used to have in my normal life, and I was going, oh, I miss it, and it's like, well, let's just do it. And it's just thinking differently about achieving the things that mattered to you before, because they still matter to you. My husband and I have done lots of walking and picnics, now that you're actually allowed to do so. But I have to say, even when we weren't technically allowed to do so, although we both have health issues that would give us a thing where it would be better for us to be out exercising more than be out, what they said. So we would go and walk into the middle of nowhere, lay out a blanket and get out a picnic. And we've done that loads and loads. And I know people who've done that with their kids as well. So it's not just a coupley thing, you know, going out and having those walks and doing those things is so blooming good for us, and for the relationships that we've got. And there is now no reason that you can't, within sort of, you know, social distancing, have that going on with more extended family, as long as you are keeping to those restrictions and making sure that you're not breaking the rules, so to speak. I've
Yeah,
had.
I mean, there's a couple of people have watched, who've posted questions, who were saying that actually that when other people don't adhere to social distancing, it's causing them some anxiety and stress. Back to this thing, doesn't it, that we can control what we do, and we do have some control over how we feel. And I think it's really important that we have to understand that how other people deal with things isn't the same as us. We don't really understand they are doing what they're doing. What we have to do is always kind of maintain focus on, okay, well, I'm going to do in terms of making sure that, you know, my body to press, and just respect everybody else's choices, even if we don't agree with them. Responsibility to consider our own health and behavior in terms of how it impacts on others. We can't be responsible, and we have to remind ourselves not to get frustrated or anxious about that.
Yeah, because we can't affect the behaviour of other people. We can only impact our own reactions to other people's behaviour. So up to lockdown, I was training for a half marathon, and I was getting cross when I was out running because people weren't moving or allowing me to move, so I'd end up sort of like sandwiched in like mid-run, and I was getting angry, so I actually stopped running for a bit. But I think people have cottoned on a little bit now and are a little bit better about it. But also I've got better at using my voice, and I now have no problem bellowing across the bridge, could you please wait for me to come across before you get on the bridge? And they go, oh, sorry, and I'm like, that's okay. But it's like you've got to have that. You've got to be able to, and I've seen people talk about getting into arguments with you in supermarkets and all sorts of things. It's really, really difficult. And we are, of course, a little bit we are very emotionally dysregulated, many of us. And the anger and the frustration that we feel, I must admit, I'm doing my shopping online, because actually it would be too much for me to go around the shops, because I did do it once and found it so immensely stressful. I decided that I was worthy of the click and collect, because I just couldn't deal with it. It was just too much for me. So I've done lots of creative stuff with my kids in particular. I've got a lovely thing here, which is neurodiversity, which I made with my 26-year-old who has autism and ADHD. So it was something we just managed to do together, which was lovely. And there's been something like that with each of my children. And these things matter because they're the most important people in my life. Movie nights, particularly musicals, because we had loads of theatre tickets booked, which we can't go to. So we've had movie nights and musical theatre nights, and we've done loads of baking. My husband has learned to bake bread, and I don't think he'll ever stop baking it now because he's really, really enjoyed it. So then I wanted to talk about the sort of more like personal stuff, making sure that you look after yourself. So running a bubble bath. Lots of people are telling me they're getting up early in the mornings to avoid the to just have some time to themselves before everybody else gets up. Some people are telling me they're staying up later, but I'm suggesting early mornings is probably better than late nights. Exercise with people or on your own, and podcasts and audiobooks are great escapism. Great time to yourself, and early nights, of course, to sleep is massively important.
Yeah. And everybody has different things, don't they? Everybody's interested in different things.
Yeah.
We love novelty, don't they? They love doing something that's a bit different. And I guess if you're anything like most people, did everything they wanted to watch on TV and Netflix. But some people are actually taking up some really interesting hobby considered before. And again, it's that motivation thing, isn't it? I think sometimes as well, you know, when you have is that, you know, there's got to be a day in the week where maybe say, right, try something you've never tried before, whatever it might be. I think sometimes it is about taking that risk, isn't it? And suddenly realizing that there are some things that are much more enjoyable will realise that they've never actually done before.
Yeah, I totally agree. Celia, could you flick to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, daily rhythms, routines and rituals. Got to admit, in the early days, I did my first few phone calls probably still in my pajamas. I've kind of got out of that now because I realised it was starting to have an impact on my productivity and professionalism, because actually, you know, there's a lot to be said for sort of like getting up, going and having, because I'm now running again, so that's obviously helpful, getting up, going and having my run or my workout, getting showered and sort of settling down for the day and having those rhythms and routines and rituals in place for myself, I found massively helpful. And I'm sure Tony will say the same. You've been sort of going into the office when it's been empty, haven't you, Tony?
Yes, but I think even a woman, not in a clinic, I get up and I get dressed for work. I have exactly the same routine, Monday to Friday, same time. Get showered, get dressed, have breakfast, have some quiet solitude, reflection. Helps me feel able to deal with the day ahead. Obviously, I'm working from home and using video conferencing a lot, so I'm not going to do, even if I wasn't doing, using video conferencing, I would still be getting up and getting dressed. And I even children have kept to that routine, particularly a lot of children who've got a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD, where they get putting their school uniform on, and there is a place in the home that is allocated and designated as are doing this particular piece of schoolwork today. And this is the place where at this time it's rare, because you've got more than one child and you have maybe the need for different types of electronic devices, places and times. And I know for some people, getting up, getting dressed, particularly a lot of children, same routine every day, even if it means getting dressed for work, if you're not necessarily going out for work, school, if you've got children. It's just that whole mindset of, preparing yourself for what it is that you have to.
So I would like to tell you a lovely little story that one of my adult clients who has ADHD and her children have ADHD was telling me, and that was that she there was an absolute refusal by the child to do any schoolwork, which I'm sure as adults with ADHD we're like, yeah, I just don't feel like I can do the work in front of me for my work. So it's much the same. And just on impulse, there was discussion when they were in the garden about turning the shed into a little school. And the young lady and her dad set up this little classroom in her shed, and there was a sign in the house with a little arrow pointing to the shed that said school. And for her, that meant the barrier to achieving her schoolwork had gone, because her needs were being met, because she needed a designated place to go and do her studies. Now, obviously, when it's raining or whatever, she's in the house doing the studies, but she's able to get back into the rhythm and the routine of sitting down and doing her studies because her needs were met. There was another way around it. And I think actually having a zone where you do your work is actually really, really important, and that you sort of lay everything out before you start. So you've got your glass of water, and you have a diary in front of you that's got your appointments in it. And then around your diary, you've kind of maybe time blocked some things in. So you may have said, okay, these are my appointments, this is the time around that. So actually what I'm going to do in that bit and that bit is I'm going to go and work on that project or that project. And I have lots of conversations with people who say to me, I just can't get my head down. And I'm like, set a timer for 25 minutes and just do 25 minutes of it, because actually you will find that you can do that. Then come out, make yourself a cup of coffee, and eventually you'll get that to 45 minutes each time, and then come out for 15 minutes and go back in again. And actually that works really, really well, because it's intense time, and actually I'm finding that people are more productive that way than they ever were before. And that sort of thing can be really, really helpful. So then they kind of like get into a rhythm of doing things that way. And having prompts around you, you're going to get distracted. So if you've got post-it notes are a bliss for an ADHD brain, because whether we like it or not, we're going to get distracted. That's going to happen whether we like it or not. We are going to get distracted, but it's a question of how quickly you can return to task. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I've got to do the Tesco's order tonight, you can just write on a post-it note Tesco's and put that to one side, and hopefully then carry on with what you're doing. And the fact that you've captured that thought hopefully should facilitate you being able to move forward. Looking at some of the comments, that's the sort of thing people are saying they're struggling with. It's like staying motivated and staying on task. Well, I think sometimes it's a question of deciding what you're not going to do as well, and because actually you can't possibly do everything that you used to do. So sometimes it's a question of saying, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do that. Being kind to yourself, taking regular breaks is massively important, and movement. We need to move.
Task initiation. Task initiation, isn't it? Sorry, Jannine.
Go for it.
The task initiation, task avoidance for those things that you don't particularly like doing. I mean, it needs to be a daily habit. I have, a to-do list of what you've got to do, what you like to do, what are the priorities, preferably allocate a certain amount of time to them, and be generous with that time, because often I think ADHD on things are going to take. But you tick it off as you go along. I think clear visual stimulus in front of you all the time. These are the things that you have to do. If you have to put it on the wall, but it's there, and as you go through everything, you mark it off. It is a great motivator knowing that you're actually working your way through things, aren't they? And we encourage our children to do them all the time, but often as adults you think, no, I don't need to do that. Well, actually, if you know you've got things to do that you really don't like doing, and let's be honest, there are lots of things that we all like doing, but we have to do them. And that, that sense of personal responsibility, and it's very easy to make excuses for ourselves, to rationalize things in order to mitigate any not having done what we knew we were supposed to. And also, again, I mean, I labor this point all the time. It's not, it is about what you must do, what you are responsible for, what you are accountable for. I don't feel like being a parent today because I'm absolutely exhausted. The children are driving me up the wall. Well, hey, guess what? We have to find rituals or a routine and structure for ourselves, and a way of taking that ensures we are able to meet the responsibilities that we have to ourselves first and foremost, to our partners, to our children, and if to our colleagues. For those of us who are aware, we have to take responsibility for that. We have to be responsible for mood management as well. And I think sometimes that structure, a clear routine, a set time for doing different things every day, including what time you get up in the morning, what time you shower, having a breakfast, getting dressed for work, whatever it is that you have to do. If it's daily and habitual, then it's in.
Yeah. So I've got friends who are both accountants, and they've got 2 young children, and in order to get through their work commitments with them both working from home, they have actually had to spread their work over 7 days. So they're each doing 5 hours of work a day each across the whole 7 days, and no, that is not ideal. and it's definitely not sustainable over the long term, but actually that's what they've had to do because they've got 2 young children. If that's what works for them right now, that works for them. It's don't be afraid to try something that works for you, but communicate that with the family around you, negotiate that with the people around you. Getting grandparents to come in and read a story to your child at a certain time of day, which gives you 10 minutes peace, or means that you can run off and make that phone call to your boss that you're supposed to make once a day. Do all of those things, use other people as best you can, delegate tasks, but much as you might be delegating a task, of course, you're still maintaining the responsibility for the actual completion of it, and learn to say no to things.
There is a place, isn't there, for a family meeting every week as a family, or whoever is in the household, whether they're roommates or your partner, or even something you're home with, that there has to be that agreement right from the outset. What do we all need from this? How do we ensure that kindness and consideration and generosity of spirit and all of those things that we create in our home, in the normal scheme of things, I don't know about you, but I know when I get home from work, I shut the door, this is my refuge, this is my safe place. But for a lot of us who are looking after children at home and homeschooling them, that boundary has become blurred, and I think it's more important than ever to be as disciplined as you possibly can with yourself about this to do. I am responsible for this, and we will agree as a home, and whoever shares this, so this is my timetable and this is your timetable, and this is how we share the resources in the home, and this is how we make the optimum we have, and let's all agree. And you know what, at the end of the day, let's make a point of checking in with everybody and just saying thank you for that. I've had a good day, and it's because I know that I'm supported and that you helped me with this and things like that. Being, I think, a greater need for us to be making a point of complimenting the people who are most important.
I think that's really good advice, Tony. We definitely have a rule, and I've got 2 17-year-olds and a 26-year-old with autism and ADHD, and meal times, sitting down together for meal times, it's a non-negotiable. It has to be, because we all need that connection, and that's when it's like, how are you? Is everything okay? And that sort of thing is massively important, because we are a team, and I do know that if my children's needs are not met, they're going to create havoc for me. And same with my husband, I've got to be honest, he's in some respects more demanding than my children. So we do have to make sure everyone's okay in order to make sure that we're all doing okay.
We remember a golden rule, that the dinner table is not the place to resolve or raise issues that we know are going to be difficult for people. You do that time of day when you sit and break bread together as a family. It is a moment of communion and sharing, do your stuff. So again, it's about being boundaried about when we deal with conversations. But the dinner table is a place that everybody belongs and should feel safe.
Yeah, let's not pick a fight at the dinner table. Those conversations can take place away from it. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so adjusting to working from home and doing it well. So really sort of like thinking about your hours and whether you're going to work normal office hours or whether you're going to have a conversation with your employer and make them flexible, or your college or university, because I know some of you are studying as well. Are you going to hold office hours, or are you going to have a moving sort of timetable that fits for you? And you are at liberty to do that more now than you've ever been before. So use it if it's what's going to be helpful for you. I put motivation and momentum, and I think that for me, on most days, my to-do list just keeps moving me through. I just move from one thing to the next thing, and I've not normally got too many things on it because I've become very realistic about what I can achieve during the course of the day, and I enjoy my work. And of course, because my work is mostly based around appointments, there is a natural momentum and natural rhythm to the way I do things, and then I kind of have a day that an admin day, because that's what works for me, because I've been working from home for a while. So I've worked out that for me the best thing to do is to do all my calls on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, have Wednesday afternoon doing admin, Thursday morning doing admin, Thursday afternoon doing the rest of my calls, and that's what works for me, because I have been working from home for a little while. Keep shifting things around until you work out what works for you, because we all have different rhythms and routines. That's what works for me, because I need to do deep work when I've got to write reports. I hate writing reports, so I have to sort of like shut down the rest of my world to dive in deep and just not have any other distractions. Therefore my phone is on do not disturb, and everybody knows those are my admin times, and generally speaking, people don't interrupt me during those times. So really think about what your office hours should be, whether they should be flexible or whether they should be traditional office hours. And the motivation momentum, it's not always possible to follow your to-do list, because sometimes it's just and I'm looking at Lindsay right now with that exact body language, and it's just like sometimes. So I sometimes recommend the reverse to-do list, or the to-do list, or the have done list, where if you really can't follow a to-do list that day, have 1, 2 or 3 things that you absolutely must do, and you do those things. But actually it's a question of tracking what you have done, because the amount of times I had a conversation with Celia and she said to me, I haven't achieved very much this week, and then we've gone over what she has done, and I'm like, you've done masses, absolutely stacks. Oh yeah, but I didn't do the things on my to-do list. Okay, you didn't, but you did so many other things. So it's like tracking what we do so that we can be kind to ourselves, and that resilience we build around ourselves by the fact that we are aware of what we have done. We have carried on moving, even if we can't face our to-do list, we've carried on moving, carried on doing, and we've tracked that. We know what we've done, which means we can then plan for the next day. Because the thing about ADHD is it needs novelty, and sometimes we just want to go with it rather than against it. And you can use a reverse to do, a to-do or a have done list in order to, on those days that you just can't follow a list, because we can't always.
Can I also add as well here, I mean, everybody are a little bit elevated at the moment. We're concerned about family members, we're concerned about friends, about colleagues, concerned about the world generally, really. Let's be honest, there is an underlying kind of anxiety for in recent months because of the pandemic. But again, it really kind of brings home, you must have daily habitual kind of do. And I noticed that, I mean, Paula and Emma have been saying that they're trying to work from home, but when other things are going on at home, to emotionally compartmentalize yourself from things and, you know, deal with the task in hand, or if you're actually kind of trying to do your job. We have to build in, you know, if you're going into the garden or standing outside for 5 minutes, you know, even if it's every half hour that you have to do it, and taking 5 minutes of slow, deep breathing at least 6 hertz, which is in for 5 seconds. So you're breathing in and out 6 times over an hour. Stretching, you know, mindfulness, and everybody in a good way, but you know, you don't have to be sat cross-legged to meditate. You can go for a walk and meditate. You can sit there and meditate, or even a blank wall. There are, you know, we have to make sure that we build into our day. For us, I'm one of those people who loves reading in the bath. It's just an absolute pleasure for me. I get, but not as a reactive strategy, I usually do that in the mornings before I even have breakfast. Starts me off for the day well. You know, I have a good half hour of really quite mindful sort of reading, you know, even when there's not always a great deal of good news in the newspapers. It is important that whatever works for you as a stress reduction in a proactive way and not just as a reactive strategy. You need to keep your whole body in, and your physical body and your mind are, you know, inseparable. We have far more control over than we realize. We just have to find out what works for us and also take responsibility every day without fail. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right through to Sunday. It has to be a daily part of our.
So I meditate. I do meditation at least twice a day, normally in the morning and then just before I go to bed. So not reactively, but yes, you can use it that way as well. And definitely I've had conversations with clients and I'm like, get yourself outside now and breathe, because actually they've got themselves into a bit of a moment. And so, you know, you can use it reactively, but in an ideal world, it would be used as a way of preparing you for the day and closing your day off. It's really, really important. The other thing I want to say is at this precise moment in time, I am standing up. I have my desk set up so that I can sit and I can stand and I can move between the two seamlessly without interrupting anything. And for me, that's massive, because just as I would say that children need to move to learn, guess what? I've got ADHD, I need to move to do my work. So being able to move, do not feel like you have got to be stapled to your chair the whole time. Think creatively. Think about being able to move from one place to the other. The work has got to get done. That's the truth of it. How you do it, you've got more freedom over that than you've ever had before. So try things and see what works for you. Webinar etiquette. I always find this.
We can view something in a positive way, can't we? You know, I've never been a fan of doing the dishes. And we've got to be happy to do the dishes. It is a moment's respite for me. It's a way of just switching off. It's quite bizarre. And now, having said it on a webinar, I'm now going to be responsible for doing the dishes every meal. You can take any activity with the right frame, you know, with the right frame of mind.
They have to be done whether we want to do them or not, don't they, at the end of the day? So webinar etiquette, I always find this one really, really interesting because I hold a lot of webinars and, you know, children will wander in or partners will wander in, or the phone will start ringing, or we'll need the loo. And even if you, regardless of ADHD, because ADHD is not the full story here, webinar etiquette is that it is absolutely okay to mute yourself or to switch your camera off to deal with something that's coming in the room. That is far better than you thinking you've kind of got to pretend it's not happening and your child coming and going, Mum, I need my bum wiping, which was an example that I was actually given today. I'm like, oh, you know, it's like when you see your child coming in, you can absolutely press the mute button and you can absolutely switch your video off for a second. Nobody's going to mind. Actually, that's quite normal. As somebody who uses webinars a lot in lots of different contexts, and I have done for as long as they've been around, it is absolutely normal to do those things, yet we feel like we mustn't. And you know, my husband's one of the worst people, because he'll come and bring me a cuppa and he'll go, oh, can I just ask you something? And I'm like, no, but I need to be able to sort of like pause the conversation so that he can't be heard asking me that irritating question, and my irritated response doesn't go back to the people I've got the meeting in front of, because that's just that's absolutely the way webinars are supposed to go. That, you know, we are absolutely at liberty to press mute or to switch our video off to deal with something briefly and then come back to it, and to say, you know, I just need to take 5 minutes, back in a minute. It's absolutely the same as you would if you were in the workplace. You know, we don't have to be stapled to a chair for 2 hours, 3 hours. I've heard of Zoom webinars going on for. You know, it's not feasible to just sit there the whole time. So, and you know, if you need a fiddle toy underneath in your hands while you're having these conversations, or you need to be standing like I am right now, that's what you do. Shall I carry on, Tony? I've put Teams, Zoom, WhatsApp and AnyDo because they are things that seem to be the things that are used the most by people who are not always working from home but are currently doing so. AnyDo was introduced to me by one of my clients, and it's actually an extension of WhatsApp, and it's a way of tracking your tasks. So I talk about bubble catchers because not everything we think about doing actually has to go on today's to-do list. So, you know, you can catch it on an app like AnyDo, which is just a task management app, and then you can allocate it to a time and allocate it to it at some points, so that you've kind of you've got it, but you've kind of like got it over to one side, and then you can use that information to populate your to-do list for that day. So my clients have been telling me that AnyDo is really, really useful. Got to be honest, I really love paper and pen. I just do, and I have a whiteboard just there, great big whiteboard. So that's what works for me because I need the visual. But for other people, and definitely when my life's different and I've got more out and about in the house other than being in the house all the time, having an AnyDo or something like that, I can see the benefits of that. I'm told it's incredibly good, so that's why I put that on there. And movement and breaks. We need to move to concentrate because we have ADHD, and we must take regular breaks. Celia, do you want to? Thank you. So Tony, over to you on this one because I'm not even really sure.
Well, do you know, there is a very, I mean, I know there are people in the States, so I don't really know how things are operating over there. But even in the UK, quality and the consistency of services in terms of healthcare is really quite patchy. At the time, ADHD, but at the moment, of course, most healthcare professionals are very focused on services in the context of the COVID-19 situation. So we know that there are lots of clinics that have been, there are lots of appointments that have been postponed, and this is varying widely across. It's the same in the States. You know, really it is about, you know, contact this provider and just checking out what is available and what's happening. And if you need some urgent expert advice, then contact your family doctors now. We'll speak to you either by telephone or on a video conferencing platform, because obviously that's the safe way to do it. But again, be mindful of the fact that clinicians out there are dealing with lots of people who are really struggling right now, and the demand for a lot of services has never been great. It's upon all of us to be responsible in terms of taking care of ourselves. You know, I mean, who's contacted me and they're really struggling in the current environment. But you know, I'm asking them the basic questions. You know, are you taking your medicines? Obviously not everybody does. You know, are you making sure you get enough sleep? Are you making sure you have enough nutrition? You know, getting some exercise every day. Are you making sure that you're practicing stress reduction strategies every day? Or, you know, really, is it any wonder you're feeling quite low? You know, and again, it comes back to those, some people mentioned about task initiation and things. It is that thing about, you know, just sometimes we just have to say to ourselves, you just have to do it. And it's like, I mean, I don't know how many of the people who are, you know, you always walk out of the gym feeling a lot better than you did when you walked in. And if anybody's like me, I really don't want to do this. Why don't I just go home early? It would do me far more good to go home and put my feet up. But actually, we do take all the necessary steps before we kind of start contacting us, asking for support. The first question we've got to ask ourselves is, are we supporting ourselves? And have we made sure that we're in a support group, things like that? And also be mindful of being the supporter, not always the one. We all rely on certain people to be a sounding board for us and to listen to us when we need it. But, you know, how often are we that for others, you know? I think, you know, when we look at what's happening in terms of the availability of health services at the minute, yes, they are under strain, but it places a greater responsibility on us to make sure that we're to stay well and healthy and to look after ourselves and to be the best that we can be, honest, whether that's our children, our partner, you know, our colleagues, our neighbours. You know, I've seen some of young people who have took it upon themselves to be picking up the phone to elderly people in the street, saying hello, or writing cards, say, I hope you feel well, and, you know, sending them to aunts and uncles about, yes, we know everybody's under a lot of strain at the moment, and so are healthcare professionals, and we have to do what we can to help them being under much pressure as they are now.
So one of the first things I did when this all came about and I found out that the NHS were looking for volunteers is I registered for check-in and chats. So I'm a registered volunteer for that. But actually they were quite oversubscribed with volunteers for that. So I haven't actually been called upon to do very much at all, although I've clocked up some amazing volunteer hours. But then, because I have the vehicle that I've got, because I've got ADHD Wise UK, I made myself available for 30-minute chats, because I really didn't know if my business was going to carry on running during this time, whether it was going to stall and I was going to be sitting there, not just poor, but also without purpose, without direction. I've got ADHD. I can't let that happen, and I did not let that happen. So I actually put so much in place for myself that I ended up a little bit overloaded. And as much as Tony's absolutely right, it's really important that we reach out and we make things purposeful for ourselves. And there's a lot of pleasure in giving. You also got to be careful that you don't overdo it, because I know I have, and I've had conversations with clients as well who have just literally been living their lives for the sake of other people and then haven't looked after themselves. And there is this flow of energy that must come. So if you are looking after other people, you've got to make sure that flows through you and that your cup gets filled back up some other way. So, you know, whether that's talking to someone like me, or whether that is just speaking to a family member, or whether it's going for a run, or having mindfulness sessions in the garden, whatever it happens to be. So you have to make sure that keeps on flowing. But, you know, a well-balanced ADHD life is one that is full of purpose and direction. And that's the case with whether we have this going, current situations or not. We are far, far better when we know where we're going and how we're going to get there. Far, far better. Celia, can you do the next slide, please? Oh, lovely. Go on, Tony.
She's the mother of invention, as I said before. I am not particularly fantastic with technology. I'm a big fan of Microsoft Office 365. Certainly, if you have dyslexia, Microsoft Office 365 is operating systems that you can use. I know that facilities on it as well, but Office 365 I think is particularly useful if you have executive functioning difficulties. So, you know, great planning and organizing tools. There's speak and type. There are so many different things in terms of utilizing technology and, you know, how you go about doing it. Those of you that are not tech savvy, I, you know, always would send myself reminders and schedule daily affirmations and encouragement with, you know, 15 and 30-minute alarms beforehand, constantly reminding myself of what I had to do, where I had to tell myself that, you know, God, you're doing your best, you know, don't beat up on yourself, all of those kind of things. Whatever really works. Smartphones can be a great virtual coach if you use them well. But, you know, I mean, again, with the articles on Attitude magazine in the States, which is one of the best websites, I think, in the world for adults, you know, and there's actually for students, but it's not just for students, it's for everybody. And let's be honest, there are lots of us now who are using technology in a way that we know. There's a lot of apps out there that I think are of dubious quality before you start spending lots of money on them. That you look at the Attitude sort of website if it's smartphone apps that you need, but in terms of organizing, functioning, you can't go wrong with Office 365.
Okay, so there's a few of our favourite books there. I have to say I absolutely love Ned Halliwell and Russell Barkley. I haven't actually read the Dale Archer one.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I was quite, I'm a great believer, like Ned, I guess, in trying to accentuate the positives. And sometimes I'm challenged about called an ableist. I don't for a second dismiss how difficult and impairing that, you know, we know that it can be really, really difficult to live with ADHD. There's no question about that. Our self-talk and how we coach ourselves, and you know this as a you know, you know, our mood, our ability to stay motivated, our ability to persevere, even with things that we're not particularly good at about, is actually really quite important, isn't it? I've found that you know, throughout my life, there's been various times to do certain things and be certain things, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have that skill set. I don't know how to do that. I've had, I'm confronted with some choices. Learn how to do it, find a teacher, have a go. I love have a go. You know, we all make mistakes. That's what learning is. It's a trial and error process. But always the positive, because I think it's very, very easy to depress yourself and everybody else around you. And I know, you know, it's an old analogy, isn't it? You know, is your glass half empty or half full? But there have been interesting variations on that opportunity to quench your thirst. There are lots and lots of different ways that we can look at things. And I think, you know, Dale Archer, really, really positive. Russell, of course, I've got the utmost respect for. He's been an inspiration to me for many years. You know, and what he's produced in terms of research and guidance is, you know, immeasurably. I have a great deal to thank him for, and of course people like Tom Brown. And there's lots of really useful things on into reading books. You know, get talking books, or get it on Kindle as an ebook, and then go to you know, your sort of talk facility. If you've got 365 facilities where the text will be spoken to you, you don't have to sit there with a book. Sometimes you can read 20 pages and not have took in a single word of what you've read because you're thinking about everything else.
So I use a lot
reading,
of podcasts and a lot of Audible, and actually I have physically read the Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, but I've also got it on Audible. And Audible books are great for when you're doing boring chores. So my bedroom often gets tidied to a podcast because it is the most loathsome task on the planet, because it's important to my husband and not to me. So I use the external stimuli of a book or a podcast to keep my brain busy while I'm just, you know, folding flipping clothes and hanging things and I find that really, really useful. So actually I haven't got to find extra time then to sit down and read, although I love reading, and I know lots of people don't, but I fell in love with reading in my 20s, having never read before, and now I've got good stamina for it, because it's one of those things that you do build stamina for over time. But I still love a good audiobook, and actually the audiobook for Taking Charge of Adult ADHD I can particularly say is very good, because it's actually in small chunks, so you can stop it, think about what you've heard, and then move on again. So I'd say that's, for me, that's one of my favourites. As I say, I've got the physical one, and I've also got it on Audible.
The other thing to remember as well is that, you know, it's not always about reading about ADHD, is it? I mean, find something that interests you. A lot of the children I work with, mostly work with children, and the parents say, oh, they just won't read. Give them something they enjoy reading. And so, you know, again, sometimes it is about, you know, asking friends for recommendations about things. I think, well, it's not something I would normally find interesting. But it's also about, you know, if you're going to have even to listen to a podcast, don't try and do that and 5 other things at the same time, because a lot of adults do that. They say, well, I'll do this and I'll do that. Particularly well, because you're trying to do too many things at once. It is about create a time, create a space where you have time to read, listen to a podcast. You know, you owe it to you that downtime, to have that solitude if you need it. You know, it's quite important, I think, that you find, and sometimes that's not about other people. Sometimes that resource is already there within you. You just have to give yourself to do it.
Celia, I believe you have lots of questions that you've kind of like been gathering for us, because obviously you and I could follow the chat completely.
Yes, I know we picked up on a few of the questions as we've gone along. I've written down the ones that I definitely think we haven't fully covered yet, and I'll go through those, and then after that, if we've still got time, we can always, people can put their hands up if they can do that, or just message and say that if they've got a follow-up, and if we have got time, we can go with that. So Tony and Jannine, thank you, that was really helpful, and that's covered so many different areas, which has been great. Just going back in a way to the beginning, Tony, you were talking about the importance of routine and structure. So you've had a few comments of people saying how hard it is without a routine being handed down to us necessarily from work. We've sort of got to create our own one. And one of the things that has been tough, I think, for some people is struggling with sleep without the sort of set timings of work and things. People are saying that there was a question about sort of going to bed later and later. Now, I know a number of the sleep hygiene things might be very similar for ADHD people and not. But I think the challenge, isn't it, with ADHD is just hard. Someone was saying it's really hard to actually get to stick to a set bedtime. And what would you suggest for people who are really struggling with that, just to get started with that, and maybe just started with something in terms of a routine?
I'll let you go, Tony.
And poor sleep is a real tough one, isn't it? And if you're exhausted the next day, no matter how physically exhausted you are, your mind still thinks that it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and it will not. I know that for some people, there are, again, you know, slow, deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, in terms of getting rid of excess adrenaline within your system. But sometimes action from your own thoughts, like an audible book, a talking book, you know, a favorite of a colleague of mine is, he has this slightly rotating light of all the space, and it easily gets him to sleep. That's projected onto the ceiling of the bedroom. There is nothing worse. It's so tired and you cannot get to sleep. Find a distraction from thoughts that are keeping you awake. But sometimes we do just kind of say, okay, I'm going to get up now. I'm not going to put the television on. I'm not going to get my smartphone out. I'm not going to look at screens that are going to keep me. I might make myself a warm drink, preferably not with caffeine in it, but find some way of breaking that looping kind of anxious thoughts that we sometimes get, where we ruminate on something, where we just can't switch the, you know, different things work for different people. But what I would say is find a distraction, audible books, sometimes slow music, slow classical music even, that's kind of reminds you of something that's highly emotive or anything, but just something that is a distraction. I've even got somebody who they go to bed every night watching comedy DVDs, and they always end their day, no matter how tough the day has been, that is how they forget the world and leave the world behind. Elevate their mood by escaping into something that just makes them smile and laugh and giggle, even if that's on a screen or if it's a comedy show on the radio or something. You know, I think you finish every day of your life with a laugh and a smile. So, you know, routines, structures, actually really do need to find out what works for you as an individual.
Yeah, no, that sounds like amazing advice. And
I've always used Audible, but at the moment I'm using a meditation every evening, and I'm finding that just sort of like leaves me sort of floating off to sleep, and that's working beautifully. But my stepson always used to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow, not like a more modern version of it, but he used to literally just have that on repeat. And we used to notice it on, and we used to go into his room and switch it off. But for him, just that being on repeat just gave his brain somewhere to go, soothed him enough that he was able to sleep. Everyone is different, but you've just got to keep trying things until you find something that works. But understand that not everything will work all the time. So when you find something that's worked for a couple of nights, that's something that works. So then when it stops working, just keep that as a technique, and keep finding new ones until you find a bank of things that work that you can just trial until you find the thing that's going to work for you at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. And just in terms of getting started with a daily routine, I think, Tony, you're suggesting to sort of decide ahead of time what it is, and to put it up so it's somewhere visible. I know some people on the chat have sort of said it's actually hard to stick with a set time maybe for getting up or going to bed. Like, it's actually when you sort of say, oh, I should be doing this by this time, would you suggest reminders or, you know, that kind of thing to sort of prepare you for that? So I know for me, if I need to be downstairs by a certain time in the morning now, I have to set alarms to go like ahead of time before I need to actually get up, so that I'm sort of setting it like a journey, that I'm sort of setting the alarm for 7, knowing I want to be downstairs for 7:30 and things like that. Is that the kind of thing you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely, because
it's just getting started with it.
It can help you feel much more in control. If you've got, I mean, I use a template, and I have a stack of them printed off, and every day I sit and I have to do for that day. I look at the previous day's list. If there's anything I need to carry over onto today's list, I do that. It's such a habit, but I have so much more control over the day.
Yeah.
I do exactly
yourself. Yeah, don't beat yourself up, but you know, do it every day. Do it every morning, going along. It's a great motivator.
When things become automatic, they tax your executive function far less. And that's why we're saying that your rituals, routines, and rhythms are so important, because they are. If you can get up and get into the shower and be out of the shower and start to get dressed and stuff, and that's just on your autopilot, you're using less of your executive function. So yeah, as much as possible, get into those. But as Tony said, I also have a book, and that works for me.
I mean, Paula Knowles mentioned here that she uses. For me, I have to physically write something down, and that to-do list is in front. I see that before the keyboard. It's always there. It's a constant. You know, a very, very busy working day, and sometimes I do have to, as they arise, operationally, in terms of what other colleagues are doing and different things. It enables me to come back and focus and transition back onto what it was I was, you know, we all have to sometimes adapt and respond to what's happening in our environment at the time. You come back to it, and if you need to adjust your timings, then you do that. But I don't have it on a spreadsheet. It's closed and I can't see it. I need to have it there, visible all the time. You know, and I think learning skills, you know, it's an absolute must.
Yeah, I agree. And I have my whiteboard and I have my book, and depending on where I am depends on whether I plan it on my whiteboard or whether I plan it in my book, because I need novelty. And also depends if I'm going out and about, because I'm going out and about, it definitely goes in my book. But I plan my week every Sunday, and I plan my day at the beginning of every day. I have to, otherwise I would be in a mess.
Yeah, no, those are great tips there. And actually, for both of you, we've got somebody on the call who's been recently diagnosed, and we had a question about how much to expect from medication. So what would you say is the difference between not having medication and being on, say, on the right medication for ADHD? How helpful is that?
I think it's about what works for the individual, and there are different types of medications. And let's be clear, medication is not some neurological El Dorado that is going to sort everything out. To do that, it's unrealistic. medication is not a morality pill. It doesn't teach. That's another myth. What it does is it helps our brains work in a way, control over how we regulate thought and emotion, to function better. But it's very much an individual thing, but it's never and should never be used in isolation. Taking medication for ADHD and not doing some daily exercise and, you know, good nutrition, things like this, I'm sorry, the medication is not going to have the optimum effect. It doesn't allow us to abdicate risks of self-care and personal responsibility for our health. It can be transformational for many people. Pharmacologically, it is a very, very effective compound in terms of its efficacy and its effect size. But I think it's too easy, isn't it? Like pharmacology, helping us stay healthy and manage our lives. And I think, you know, that can be said for, you know, for to help us improve the quality of our life. You know, we need to take responsibility for all of those to do in order to stay well and to be able to function properly. It's then you always talk to your own clinician. You know, be very careful about the guidance that you get on the internet. Right for you or your child if you have a child with ADHD. It is about what is right for you. But medication is cure-all, and it is not the only thing that you should be using. It should just be one tool in a whole toolbox of strategies that you have. Medication at all. So it is again a personal choice, and you know, one that comes with other.
Yeah.
Medication should be you, but on a good day. It should never be so strong or that it's that it changes the person that you are, makes you like super productive, because if you do that you're going to crash. It is about it being you but on a good day, and the rest is about developing those skills, that self-awareness. And of course I'm a coach, therefore I would say that, but it's true. You know, it is about learning who you are and what you need, and putting those things in place that you need that make you the best you that you can possibly be. And meds are part of that, but they are not the entire solution. They can never be the entire solution. I definitely have conversations with people and they're expecting too much of the medication. It's like, okay, but you know, well, when it comes down to it, they're in the wrong job sometimes. And it's like, okay, well, you're never going to be able to motivate yourself to do that particular thing, because actually it's not the right job for you, and that's expecting too much of the medication. So there's often unrelated ADHD things going on in the adults that I work with. So there's quite a lot of digging in terms of coming to terms and getting them on a track that really works for them. Because as I said before, when we are purposeful, when we're on the right track, we are formidable. That's the upside to ADHD. When we're on the right track, we're amazing.
Yeah, no,
yeah, and I think we've got to remember as well how about our lives that is either good or challenging. You know, it doesn't have to be viewed through. You know, ADHD is a facet of who we are. It is not the prism that through which it guides. It is not the rationale behind every choice and decision that we make. Absolutely not the excuse that we can use when, you know, when it's really important, isn't it, to kind of keep this in perspective and understand that, you know, ADHD is something that impacts on our faculty and certain aspects of our daily functioning. In picture, and I think we have to be careful not to kind of be too laissez-faire and say, well, okay, that's your ADHD, so what are you going to do about it? You know, you have a responsibility to manage your ADHD. We do need to be careful about how we view that aspect of ourselves. It doesn't give us an easy way out at all, but it does demand that we actually are quite honest with ourselves. And sometimes a coach or a good therapist is really quite important. We do need somebody to tell us how it is, you know, and some of us who've got good friends who won't collude with us, you know, who won't be, you know, we can be making excuses for ourselves. We have to be gentle and kind with ourselves, but let's be honest, let's pin everything on ADHD, because I think sometimes we can do ourselves a great disservice if we do.
Yeah, okay. No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much for the advice there. And a couple more questions, and then I think we may need to be drawing to a close. But one thing which you probably recognise as a question that you guys hear a lot, what would you do? There are people who are struggling to meet deadlines, and I think that's quite a common thing with ADHD, whether we're sort of overly deadline focused and not able to avoid the rush at the end. But what would you suggest when people have deadlines for work, particularly perhaps those deadlines that are a little bit of a way off, so they're easy to procrastinate on and then end up being late meeting them? What kinds of things would you guys recommend to people there?
So we have 2 time zones, now and not now. So it's either it's got to be done right now, but if it's got to be done tomorrow, next week, next month, they mean somewhat the same thing, unless you have learned to break them down and to put an aspect of them into the now. So you might be like, okay, so I've got this project to do. What are the steps within that? You're going to have to spend time breaking that project down. You've got to work out how much of that you've got to get done this week, this month, this quarter, so that you're working towards it in increments, so that it doesn't come and bite you on the bum. The reality is, and Tony, I know will agree with me on this, whether we like it or not, we often end up leaving things to the last minute. And that's not too bad if you've done loads of prep, and then you can just finish it at the last minute when the adrenaline's flowing through you and it's the singular focus that you've got in front of you. We can do great things, but only if we've done the prep behind it. If we haven't done the prep behind it, we are absolutely setting ourselves up to fail. So it's not that we have to have the whole damn thing finished and avoid the last minute bit. It's that the last minute bit needs to be something that's manageable because we already did the prep. So it's about breaking it down and doing something for it today, something for it tomorrow, something for it this week, something for the next week. And if we've done that, when it actually comes to it, it won't be too big a deal to be pushing the deadline a little bit, because it's still within us, and we can use that last bit of the urgency that comes from pushing the deadline, the thrill almost of pushing that deadline, but only if we've done the prep. Without the prep, it's rubbish. Yeah. We fall over.
And Jannine, one of the things that can also impede on reaching deadlines is actually the getting started and task avoidance, which is quite common as well.
As coaching, that's one of the things I work in is quite a lot, is sort of like getting, okay, so what are you doing today that's moving you towards that deadline? What are you doing this week that's going to move you to that, and creating accountability so that people are coming back to me and saying, well, I'm going back to them and I'm saying, did you manage to do that? And they're saying, yes, I did, or no, I didn't, because, and then overcoming that because, so they then do get that done. So whether you're using a coach, you probably need somebody to be holding you accountable, whoever that happens to be, whether you've got a critical friend or a partner who's able to do these things for you, that's fine. So it's breaking it down.
Yeah, okay. And just maybe making that first task that bit smaller, just to even get started.
Yeah.
That's a sort of Japanese technique, isn't it? Just to give yourself 2 minutes even of doing something you find really painful, even if it's starting like that, maybe just to move forward. So you just, give yourself a short time frame, so it doesn't feel so daunting. Okay,
Plan it out in
brilliant.
the early stages. Plan it out in the early stages and work out what you need to do that week, that month.
Yeah.